Hello, welcome to the Modern Software Engineering channel. I'm here today with Dave Farley and Daniel Terhorst-North, and we are discussing one big question. How do you scale software engineering culture? So what do you think?
I think this is a problem, this question, because it's not got a yes-no answer.
Oh no, we need more binary, polarizing questions.
Go ahead, Dan. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I was going to say, I think with anything like this, it's useful to start with definitions, and not in any formal sense, just because when full disclosure, I do this a lot, right? The scaling culture piece is kind of my gig. So one of the places I like to start is just getting people to articulate what they think culture is, particularly software engineering culture. That's a great one. Just because you often end up with this sort of wonderful Venn diagram of what people think and what they say and what they understand. And so trying to find some common ground to talk about culture from is a good place.
Yeah, I've always thought of culture as being kind of like just the way we do things around here. It's kind of what's sitting in the walls that everyone kind of knows, but no one's actually kind of said. Does that capture some of it, I guess?
I love that. Sorry, that is absolutely like a golden definition. It's another description I like, is it's what you do when no one's watching.
I was about to say the same thing. Yeah, it's the stuff that happens when nobody's forcing you to do anything. It's just what happens. Yeah, absolutely.
So before we get into software engineering culture per se, I just want to chuck in a model that I've been using for a few years around this. A chap called John Roberts wrote a book called The Modern Firm some years ago. He's actually an economist, and I've got to say, he writes like an economist. It's a really dry read. As much as I found it useful, unless that's your bag, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a book. It does have two, what I think are brilliant models or ideas in it. One of which is PARC, P-A-R-C, which is an acronym. It stands for People, Architecture, Routines, and Culture. And his argument is that culture is the output of a system. You can't change culture. Culture is what happens because. And the inputs then are people, architecture, and routines. So people are the human beings, right? But it's, the whole human being. It's not that they're a developer or a tester or a manager. It's that they have hopes and aspirations and history and friends and network and all that stuff. Architecture then is the org structure. But then there's two architecture. Well, I'll come to that in a minute. So architecture is the structure of the place. Routines are what people do, the things people do. So routines might be periodic, so weekly meetings or annual reviews. They might be event-based, so handling a customer return or something like that. So that's your routines. And the combination of the people, the architecture, and routines kind of sets the tone for the culture. And what he describes is that you have what he calls a formal and informal architecture. So the formal architecture is your org chart, that's easy. The informal architecture is that Emily's been here for 15 years. She knows everybody. She's plugged into everybody. If you need something doing, you put a bottle of fine whiskey on Emily's table.
Not whiskey.
And suddenly, and then suddenly, or whatever Emily's
chocolate. Dark
chocolate. There we go.
There you go.
You put some fine Swiss chocolates on Emily's desk, and suddenly doors open. And likewise with routines. So the one thing you can guarantee people aren't doing is whatever the formal process is, right? The documented process. What they're doing is getting work done.
Yeah.
So the process is do A, then B, then C. But Dave's smart, and so he knows. He comes in the morning, does all of the A's. He can't do all the B's without Daniel's sign-off. So Daniel gets in at about midday. So he waits till midday, does all the B's, and then all the C's are time-consuming. So he does them one after another. And then we bring in a system that does A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C. And then on day one, he's stuck because he gets to the first B and nothing happens till lunchtime. So the culture so we've got informal architecture, informal routines. And your culture then is how well those two things are aligned. So in other words, if the organization is set up in the way that you'd set it up anyway, if you could do it informally, and if the things you're supposed to do are the things that everyone does anyway, what you have is a really high-performing organization full of happy people. And the problem with most organizations, and this is kind of one of the crux of the modern firm, is that you've got sort of this thing going on. That's the org shape, and that's the work trying to happen, and they're just completely colliding into each other. And then your culture is frustration, is subterfuge, sabotage, resentment, high attrition. So I just carry this model around in my back pocket all the time as kind of, we need to change the culture around here. Okay, well, where should we start looking?
Wow, that was a pretty comprehensive explanation of how you change or how do you get culture, I guess. I'm reminded of Alistair Cockburn. His observation about process was that, the people characteristics are the first order success driver. That's actually the most important factor. And your model there just brought in architecture and routines as well. But the people are the bigger fact here, I think. I'm curious whether you see a role for skill in this, because some part of doing the work does require skill, and scaling a culture, spreading it, would also, in my book, involve training people.
I'd see that there are two levels of skill involved in that as well. So there's the skill that I think was implicit in what Dan was saying of being able to navigate and to some extent manipulate the organizational constraints. The familiarity that we need to talk to you and bring you chocolate to get anything done, that kind of stuff is one set of skills, really. And to be frank, it's often one of the things that people like us as technologists struggle with a bit, because part of those skills are about communications and playing the politics game and all of that sort of thing very often in big organizations. And then there's the other sorts of skills, which we're probably more comfortable with, sort of the technical skills of getting our job done and the expertise that we know how to do something that we often need to subvert some kind of externally, set process to achieve. And so I think both of those are true. So this kind of plays into the idea that I think Alistair Cockburn is referring to, really, which is that the process doesn't matter as much as the people. If you've got great people, then they will make it work, whatever the process. And I kind of think that's nearly true, but not quite. I think that there are processes that are so bad that will stop even the best people. Eventually there are, organizational strategies that will kill off your ability to do a good job. And they will make the good people leave, and they will make the good people give up, or they will stifle creativity and whatever it takes to do a good job. So I think there's a bit of both, but obviously, no, not obviously, but I think skill matters. I think it's subtle. It's not kind of the deep list of skills on your CV. It's the Project Aristotle thing that Google found, which it's about team cohesion, trust, collaboration. Those kinds of skills are probably more important than the technical skills in many ways, but we need both.
So I'm going to say yes, and I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head with the success is determined by the organizational constraints, and that's my secret weapon, if you like. That's because that's a wonderful double-edged sword.
Yeah,
you can use it for good and evil. So the big question is about scaling engineering culture. And what I found works again and again is using these kind of, Dave Snowden used to call them governing and enabling constraints, but he's got some different words now. But I like governance. So governing constraints are the rules of the road, right? In the UK, we drive on the left. In Sweden, they drive on the right. It kind of doesn't matter as long as everyone does, right? Because otherwise people die. So those are your governing constraints. Enabling constraints are things like you should give way. You should let people out of side turnings, right? You don't have to, but if you do, everything just works better.
Uh-huh.
And so when I'm working with typically I'll go into an organization, it's generally very fragmented, lots of different ways of working, and we're trying to get people pointing in the same direction without overly constraining them. Because that's when, you want it to be like, you want to make the right things easy, and get those behaviors. And so one of the things I introduce very early on is the idea of flow metrics, of lead time, throughput, work in process. So lead time is just wall clock time from I will do this thing to thank you. Throughput is how much stuff did you do? You define what a thing is, how many things did you do? And then work in process is how many things you're doing right now. And those three numbers together can give you a really strong insight into how a team is working. And we don't use them to compare teams because that doesn't make any sense. We can use them to compare the team with themselves a month ago or a quarter ago or 6 months ago. And generally I'll go into, 100, 200 person kind of program size, so teams of teams. And the first thing I ask, the consultant's coming in, he's going to make us all do Scrum or, most will do Kanban or something. I'm like, no, whatever you're doing is fine, right? Are you shipping stuff? Good. I'm not going to get in your way. But I do need those 3 numbers every 2 weeks. And some teams find it trivially easy to give me those numbers. They're probably tracking them. Some teams are like, what's lead time? What's and so then you work with those teams to start being able to observe themselves. And just doing that, just asking them to look at those things, you see a change in behavior. And there was a wonderful piece of research some years ago, and I can't remember the source, but the idea was actual way to a new way of thinking. And it totally flew in the face of things like mindsets and culture shift and all of the kind of hand-wavy, fluffy stuff that was going on in the mid-2010s of like, we can culture your organization. And this person came up with this brilliant, they said, no, what you do is you start doing the thing you want to be able to do. And you're going to be rubbish at it, right? None of us started walking well. None of us could ride a bike, and you do it. And as you start getting better at it, that's the skill thing. Your brain shifts in a way that says, oh, this is cool now. And then now it becomes habit. And once it becomes habit, it gets parked in a different part of your brain and you can now learn the next thing. So we're introducing these constraints, these governing constraints. We need these numbers, which introduce behavioral changes, which then become habit. And you suddenly see this stuff kind of rolling out like a ripple wave across the organization.
Yeah.
And then, Sorry, Dave, I want to bring you in at this point, Dave. I'm really interested. I want to bring Emily in at this point, because while we're talking about the behavior change stuff, I think one of the most powerful things in a technical program team, and that's generally what we're talking about, sort of, the 50 to 200 person teams of teams programs, is how do you make those good technical, or your modern software engineering or XP or DevOpsy, how do you make those skills into habits, and how do you make those habits universal?
Yep.
I find that a really exciting thing to explore. And generally it tends to work kind of at 2 levels. Like there's me doing the strategy stuff with the program folks and the exco or whatever. And then you've got, Emily's are very, very rare, but you get some, folks like Emily who are in the team, getting them really excited about different technical ways of working.
I just need to let my cat out.
I'll talk while Emily's letting her cat out.
Emily is letting the cat out of the bag. We knew it was going to happen.
Okay, I won't. Emily's back. Go.
Yeah, so Danny, you just explained that one way to get change is to first get people to change the behavior, and then the understanding comes afterwards, and then it turns into a habit. And that is a model for learning technical skills as well. That you first try and get people to actually do the thing, do the test-driven development, write the test first, do the refactoring, by kind of giving them really, really clear instructions and support to just start doing it. And then when they've actually done it on like an easier exercise for a bit first, then they start to be able to understand what the point of it is. And then they start to be able to apply that in their code. So that's kind of a model for the coaching that I do is trying to get developers to behave differently in the code and then try and explain what it is that they're doing and why. So that's it. I think it fits. It's another way you're trying to change behavior fundamentally.
So I think that's an important point. And one of the really surprising things for me from the findings of the DORA reports was the idea of being able to act your way towards good performance. So I hadn't really thought about that, and I'd kind of bought into the idea that you needed to be able to think about, the DevOps idea of you need to be able to think about changing culture in order to be able to get to the wins and all of those kinds of things. And then we've got evidence that says just follow the practices, kind of do as you're told for a little bit, follow these distinct things, and you'll get better results, and your culture will begin to change. And so you'll get to the point where this all just works and becomes more normal. And I've seen that. I've part of my consultancy of helping organisations to adopt continuous delivery and the sort of engineering practices that I espouse is really about that. So start off just doing the things. So optimize to get good feedback inside your team. You get continuous integration up and working. Do test-driven development and do all of those things. Follow those recipes for a little while. And over time, you will adapt and you will find the bits that you like and find the bit that you don't. But start just doing those things because they will work better than the default without. And they will put you on the track towards wanting the feedback from great tests, wanting to work in this more experimental, exploratory way that we all enjoy so much. So I think that's really important. I'm going to pause at that point and thank our sponsor. So this episode is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant helps you to become a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of visual interactive lessons in math, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. I love learning new things and have been a Brilliant subscriber for some time now, a long time before they started advertising on this channel. I use it to indulge my love of maths, physics, and science in general. In addition to all of these, though, Brilliant also has lots of courses on programming and AI and other topics that I'm sure that you'd enjoy. I particularly enjoyed their courses on scientific thinking, geometric thinking, digital circuits, and am now learning more about quantum computing. Brilliant is a more effective way to learn because it allows you to learn interactively, interacting with the topics as you study them. It makes learning so much more engaging and I think builds a more intuitive understanding of the subjects. I use Brilliant for a few minutes most days, completing a few lessons at a time on my phone or computer. To learn for free on Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/modern software engineering. Scan the QR code on screen now or click the link in the description below. Brilliant has also given our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to all of their courses. So thanks very much to Brilliant for sponsoring this episode. And now back to the conversation. So I think this idea of kind of acting towards the goal that you want to do is a very good tool for it, helping culture to change. The other strong tool that I'd like to mention and throw into the mix while we're talking about it is pair programming. I think one of the most effective ways to spread and strengthen team culture is through pair programming.
I couldn't agree more. I want to plug Emily's work at this point because in preparing for this conversation, I was looking through some of the Saman material and two things about it just filled me with joy, right? The first is the teaching method is based on training from the back of the room, which I'm a huge fan of. Sharon Bowman can do no wrong. And the other part is it is this lovely interplay between class-based learning and then immediately applying things. So this idea of a learning hour where you spend a chunk of time practicing a new skill or at least learning about a new skill and then immediately go and do it. I think there's I'm actually writing something at the moment about learning, and there's a myth which we can happily dispel on this channel. It's already been dispelled elsewhere. There's some great research out of Swansea University recently, like a meta-study. There's a very popular learning model about what they call learning styles, and there's a bunch of these, but the most common one you'll come across is VARK, which is visual, auditory, reading, and kinesthetic. So people who learn by seeing pictures, people who learn by listening, hearing stories, people who want to just be left alone to read the book, or kinesthetic is people who want to interact with things. And it sounds really appealing and it's nonsense, right? There is zero evidence behind this model. And yet most educators believe it. Most educators think they're applying it. It turns out everybody is a kinesthetic learner. We're all interactive learners. We all learn best by doing, right?
Yeah.
And we all retain best by spaced repetition. So by doing a thing and then doing it again and again and again. And once it's really, really embedded, we can do it at greater intervals. But by and large, the idea of active learning or interactive learning supplemented with spaced repetition is one of the few evidence-based learning models. And we're just not doing it. And it staggers me. And so, just looking at what Emily has kind of imbued into Saman just made me, as I was looking through it, I was going, yes, that's what I would do. Oh, yes, someone in the world is doing it. And then I looked at a list of like Saman buddies and there's like hundreds of these people. I'm like, brilliant. She's got a small army out there doing this. And that is, as I said, the scaling thing happens on two levels. You've got the strategic piece where you're I'm working with CIOs, CTOs, or their L1, L2s, that kind of level, a lot of the time, just trying to get them to understand how much more effective their organization can be. Just look at the same thing through a different lens.
Yeah.
And then I'm working in the teams. But as one of me, I don't scale. So the way I scale is I work with, team level folks who are one of my favorites. I'm going to name names. A chap called Tom Scott, who I think some of us know from ex-ThoughtWorks, and Daniel Worthington Bodart. And they, among many others, they both have this wonderful ability to be having way more fun than anyone else, right? You're in a team and you look at them and they're always pairing. And they're always having more fun than you. And so what do you want to be? You want to be having the same fun as them. So you go and pair with them and they infect you. And then suddenly you are, writing tests before you write your code. And the tests are code examples and they're behavioral.
Yeah.
And you are automating the boring stuff, but you're not automating before it gets boring. And just all those really good habits. And it's about creating an environment where doing the right thing is also the most fun thing.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to hear you say that you about the Saman method of technical coaching, which I use. And it is, as you say, we're trying to use these brain-friendly training methods that are actually going to help developers to change their behavior in the code.
I think the other part of this, in terms of the scaling part, is it seems to me that it's not one size fits all. That there's not a fixed recipe to follow. That what we're talking about are kind of, you talked about constraints and sort of guidelines that will help people to navigate in roughly the right direction. But it seems to me that the way that you scale is by making decision making more distributed. You need lots of small teams that are able to think and work closely together and make progress more independently of other parts of the organization very often.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and this is where I think most consultants and most external kind of agitators, if you like, this is a mistake I see again and again. And I was talking to someone about this recently. There's a lovely Swedish, I think it might be Danish, I think it's Swedish, Jente. And Jente is based on, I think it's like a 19th century story or poem or something. And there's these kind of 10 rules. And they're rules like, you're not more important than anyone else. You don't know more than anyone else. Get over yourself, basically. It's like 10 ways of saying get over yourself.
Yeah.
And the people are most influenced by their peers, by people around them.
Yeah.
If I'm in an organization of hundreds of people or thousands of people, no one's listening to Daniel. Right? They're listening to their buddies. And so if I can influence their buddies and their buddies can then become ambassadors, can then become those vectors, then that's how you affect change. And that is necessarily different in every organization. You can't come in and big agile framework them.
Yeah.
You can't come in and reorg into this shape or this set of shapes. I mean, you can, and people do it all the time, and it's not sustainable. You go back in 18 months and it's all regressed.
Yeah.
Or the next lot of consultants have rolled in.
Yeah. That's another important point. Sorry, Dan, not to interrupt you, but I think that's another vital point just to reinforce where we started, I guess, which is that culture's the stuff that sticks. If you change culture, it's durable because that's now part of the new culture.
Dave, I've got to tell you, one of the reasons I left ThoughtWorks and went on this whole thing now of teams and organizations, it happened a couple of times. The one I remember vividly, we were at a bank in London, and I was in there. I was dropped into a team because the team was a bit dysfunctional, and it was a brilliant case study because there was a team of 9 people, and there was 3 ThoughtWorks, 3 contractors, and 3 perms or something, right? So it's exactly your Petri dish, and they're all at loggerheads, and so Dan goes in to make the piece kind of thing, and I'm like, I'm not going to come in and make the piece. I'm just going to come in and listen. So I came in and I drank a lot of coffee over a couple of days, right? I took everyone out for coffee, one at a time. And it turned out, which you'll find both, I'm sure, find totally unsurprising, that everyone actually wanted pretty much the same thing. They were just all convinced that the others didn't, and they were all busy digging their heels in and not listening.
Yeah.
And so when I then proposed the thing that everyone wanted, they all went, yeah, why don't we do that? But over the next about a year, it wasn't that long. It was about 9 months or a year. We changed the culture within this team and within the teams around this team. And honestly, people were like bouncing into work, right? They were having fun. They were enjoying themselves. And there's a part of me, that's like getting on with the job. And there's a part of me that's super proud. James Lewis was there. And one of the first times I worked with James Lewis. And we were just like, we did that, We did that. That's really cool. And then, but that's not the point. The point is this: about 18 months later, I went back to the same bank, to the same part of the bank, for some other reason, and it broke my heart. The whole thing had just completely regressed. Half the people had realised that this would never happen again, and they'd quit. To go and find somewhere where it would happen again. And the rest of them were just checked out. There was just nothing behind the eyes. And I thought, right, okay, this is not okay. Right, I need to find a way where I can work with teams and create this thing, and that it's not one of the business development guys I used to work with had this lovely metaphor. He says, like, a lot of change is like a balloon full of water, and you come in and you do this, and you can do that for as long as you like. As soon as you let go, you were never there, right? And how instead do you make that change last? And it is behavioral, it is habit forming, but it has to also be structural.
Yes, it does.
Because if all the forces acting on that team are going to cause the team that was there when you found them, they'll do it again.
Yeah. I think we should probably wrap up. We've been talking for a little while. So can anybody ever go at summarizing what our advice is? What's the answer to this question? How do you scale this kind of engineering culture change?
Okay, so I can give this a try. So Daniel has pointed out that you need to look at the people, the architecture, and the routines, and those are the things that will change. Those that cause the culture. You can't go in and just change culture. You have to change the causes of the culture. And that the people is a huge effect. And you were also talking about getting the behaviors to change, and then I think you've picked a particular behavior that you target initially, that you want them to gather these particular metrics, and through forcing them to gather these metrics, that has a snowball effect and other changes in the way they work. So that's something that I picked up. And then I was saying that similar at the team scale, where you're looking at the engineering skills, it's also a strategy I use. Just try and get people to do the new behavior in a safe environment, and then follow it up in doing that thing in their production code to try and get the culture at the team level to change. And then you were just also at the end, it was a bit depressing at the end. It was like, this is hard. It's really hard to get it to stick, I think was the point there. Did I miss anything important there?
No, you didn't. There was one thing I meant to mention on the way through, which was, and actually, I'll probably, the first time I did this, it was an unintended consequence, but now I actively do this, is that once we had, I think it was about a dozen teams or 15 teams, about 100 and something people. Once we had all these teams reporting basically not comparable metrics, but the same metrics, fortnight after fortnight, we had a program dashboard that had never existed before. Right, we could look at and I was working with the program leads, and we could look at a single dashboard that said, where can we help? So if we saw a team whose throughput was trending downwards, or lead time was trending upwards, or they were taking on more stuff or whatever, it wasn't like, let's go over and, that team's doing it wrong, we need to go and tell that team off. It was very much, and with this, I love this about the particular leadership at this client, is they had a really holistic view of this, which was, what are we doing wrong such that team is struggling, right? So that's the presenting symptom. Those team's metrics are the presenting symptom. I've got a tingling in my finger, right? The tingling in your finger could either be you've been resting on your arm and your arm's gone dead, or you're about to have a heart attack, right? Same symptom, massively different potential causes, right? So we don't look at the team, we look at what are the forces acting on the team such that this is what's happening. And that opened so many doors. That opened so many avenues to explore of like, wow, okay, until we had eyes on the fact that this team was finding it harder and harder to ship or to make changes, or was being forced to take on more and more work, we wouldn't have known to look for that needle in this haystack of teams and activity and behavior. So the creating that consistency at a team level suddenly allows you to roll things up to program level.
I have a concrete example of that. It's probably too much for the end of the.
This is a great summary. The summary is a whole new conversation.
So I was working with a fairly large group of people working in separate teams, and I was doing all the stuff to try and introduce continuous delivery and focus on small teams, more collaborative working, pair programming, TDD, all of those nice things that we'd hoped to promote. And there was a bit of resistance. There was a bit of pushback. And so it turned out that the bonus scheme in this organization was based on measures of individual productivity. And so if somebody's pair programming with somebody, they're not going to be more productive than their mates. And so they're not going to get such a big bonus. And so I talked to the senior management, and they went and changed the incentive scheme. But it's that looking for, the unintended consequences of constraints that you think were a good idea, but are actually not, that they're pushing the wrong sorts of behaviors. And part of the game must be about diagnosing those sorts of problems and removing those unwanted constraints.
So I'm going to suggest, if you haven't already got one of these, that there's a whole one big question topic around perverse incentives and unintended consequences.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We should do one of those.
Yeah. So pair programming for the win. We should do more of that. If it's good for spreading culture and all of the other things that we've discussed as well. So thank you very much for joining me for this one big question. If you've enjoyed this episode, please click like and also subscribe so you can get more of this kind of thing, and it'll help the channel to grow. So thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks.